Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock. Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
Hey everybody, MichaelBtheGameGenie here, and today we're going to be talking about some fun NES Nintendo Entertainment System games for Halloween.
Goodbye.
Alright everybody, today we're going to be talking about some fun Nintendo Entertainment System NES games for Halloween. I originally was going to call, I think, every single video in this series great games for Halloween, and then the system, you know, really straightforward, pretty easy stuff. But as I ended up doing out this list for the games that I wanted to record for the NES, I really wanted to find games that I hadn't really talked about before and were kind of off the radar. And the more I thought about it, these games aren't necessarily great. I mean, they're great fun, but they're not necessarily banner great games. So it was just easier to call them fun NES games for Halloween. You might think they're great, and they're definitely fun, so I hope you guys enjoy them. And the cool thing is, there's also an overlying theme. As I was picking these games out, it just kind of happened. So let's see if you can pick out the theme. Anyways, on to the first game. Pokemon, it's you and me. Whoa. Wrong pocket monsters. I mentioned Monster in My Pocket very recently when I talked about Bucky O'Hare a few videos back. This was a period in time when Konami was trying to branch out with some licensed properties, and they bet hard on Monster in My Pocket. According to my sources, you know, Wikipedia, Monster in My Pocket was a toy line released in 1989 by Matchbox that featured over 200 toys. I don't really remember them all that well, other than they were all one color, and as a kid, I thought that was pretty lame. For some reason I believe there was a cartoon series, but apparently my memory is failing me in my old age, and they only really had one animated special. There was an overarching story based on comic books of the same name, and apparently the storyline from the game follows the comic pretty closely. The game's big bad Warlock wanted control over all the monsters, and cast a shrinking spell against those in his way. Unfortunately the spell went wrong, and all monsters were shrunk. In the game you play as either the monster, which we all wrongly call Frankenstein, more on that later, or the vampire. These are only two of the many good guys from the series that oppose Warlock, but I guess they thought two were enough as it's only a two-player game. You start the game watching TV and must make your way through the house and all the way to Monster Mountain to defeat Warlock. I don't really know if it matters who you use, but I always select the vampire. I did try playing as the monster in this capture session originally, and something just felt off. I can't say for sure they play any differently, but the vampire feels faster and his attacks lower to the ground. The game is pretty good looking graphically, as Konami did some great sprite work here that they were famous for in this period. The action can get hectic at times with many, and I mean many enemies on screen, and this is where one of the graphical failings start to show, as there is some noticeable flicker in the enemies during these parts. It's something that I am very familiar with in late Konami games, being a big fan of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game. The music isn't Konami's best work, but it's still pretty freaking great. Then again, of course it is. It's Konami on the NES. It seems like even when they have an off day musically, it's still memorable. The game focuses very big on the miniature dynamic, very similar to Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers on the NES, as the stages really exemplify the size of these monsters in comparison to their surroundings. I would say Chip 'n Dale is a great comparison when speaking about the difficulty too, because this is an easy NES game. Not foolproof because there are not unlimited continues, but it is very forgiving. I beat this game the second time I played through it, and the first time made it all the way to the final boss before dying. If you are hardened in the fires of NES difficulty, this should be a breeze. If you are more of a casual gamer like me, it still provides enough of a challenge to make the game enjoyable and a fun monster romp for Halloween. I don't even know where to start here. Monster Party is a game on the Nintendo Entertainment System that's as far as I can get before all common sense goes out the window. I mean, just by looking at the box art, this looks like it's the coolest game in the universe, with Dracula, Swamp Monster, Medusa, and so many other familiar movie faces. But what does the title mean? Monster Party? So are they like celebrating something? Christmas office party? I don't get the title, but I'm probably making way too big a deal out of this. And trust me, when you get a closer look here at the game, there are much bigger things to question. The game actually starts with a pretty funny cinematic, where you see the hero, Mark, walking home from a baseball game with his bat when he notices something in the sky. What he thought was a falling star turns out to be a monster crashing to the ground. The monster then asks Mark to use his baseball bat and help him save the monster world he comes from. 4 reasons. Mark flies off with the monster when he reveals that they can combine themselves to fight the evil, which becomes a very useful dynamic in the game. I really have to give them credit for the combat in the game because the bat isn't just a melee weapon, but it can also be used to reflect enemy attacks, which is a really cool dynamic, and one I can't think off the top of my head is being used in another game like this. The rebounding enemy attacks isn't just a gimmick either, as it actually improves the gameplay and is essential in defeating some of the bosses. Take for instance this weird plant-type boss you come across. Well, as we go on, you will find out that I use the term weird for all the bosses and enemies and levels. Look, the whole damn game is weird, but I'm getting off topic. Anyways, back to this Little Shop of Horrors type character. He throws these bubbles at you, and the best, and really, in my opinion, only way to take him out is to hit the bubbles back at him with the bat. That is easier said than done because this game has better bat physics than most baseball games on the system, and the reflection is completely determined on the angle and timing of the swing. Very complex physics in a game like this, and really just one of the many surprises this game brings to the table. After dispatching so many enemies as the boy, you will turn into the monster-like dragon, which will allow you to fly and shoot projectiles. This form is very cool and makes dispatching some of the enemies extremely easy, but it's only for a limited time, so try and save it for around the more difficult bosses. The enemy design in the game is truly, and I mean truly, something else. A pair of legs is an enemy, a dog with a human head walks at you, a fish head with a pair of legs. Man, this is truly the stuff of nightmares. About halfway through the first level, you see a giant cactus, and then the screen goes wild, and everything becomes dark and evil. I don't know what in the hell is going on, but the game just seemed to ask me, you want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. I made it as far as fighting a boss in level 2 that was essentially a fried shrimp. Well, that's enough insanity for today, but really, a much better game than it gets credit for. This is another weird game, but not nearly as weird as Monster Party, and expensive to boot. It was one of the earlier Angry Video Game Nerd reviews, and not exactly a common game, so the price went up early. Apparently it's selling for about $100 Canadian now loose, and that is crazy to me. The game starts with the resurrection of Frankensteins Monster, who is just kinda called Frankenstein incorrectly here. Upon his return, he now also has magical powers, 4 reasons, and leads a supernatural army to get his revenge on the townsfolk who roundly persecuted him in the past. During his destruction of the town, he kidnaps a maiden and takes her as his bride. You are a warrior tasked with rescuing the fair maiden and destroying the monster once and for all. The game's opening does a great job of telling the story and has some really cool cinematics for the NES, as well as some killer background music. I also do want to take a second and say how cool I find the intro screen with the flashing lightning and the monster silhouette showing through it. Once the game starts, it seems like it's nothing special, just a side-scrolling brawler where you have to punch and kick the enemies approaching you from the supernatural army. As you dispatch the enemies, you will notice that they sometimes drop weapons, like the club I managed to pick up. With the melee weapon, the action really picks up, and combat gets much more exciting. The problem is that once you get hit, you will lose the weapon. You can crouch back down and pick it up, but if you drop it a few times, it will disappear, similar to the weapons in Double Dragon. There is also an orb that some of the enemies drop that will give you a projectile shot that I believe is an absolute must in the game. The biggest problem with the projectile is that unlike the melee weapon, it's one and done, and as soon as you are hit, it disappears. What is even worse is that the projectile is rarer than the melee weapon, so don't expect to see it pop up all that often. The bosses in the game are pretty cool, and are all mythical creatures like Death here in the first level. Death wasn't that hard to beat, unlike in Castlevania, and once I discovered the easy pattern of hitting him as soon as he appears, he was a breeze to take down. But, then I remembered the goddamn bird. I should have already known this after watching the AVGN review of this like 100 times, but after you beat Death, a bird comes down and tries to pick you up. If you do not kill the bird, he will pick you up and bring you all the way back to the start of the level. And you restart the level after losing all health and lives, and the boss is still there, and to be beat again when you make it back to the end of the level. After you beat death again, guess what? The bird comes back again, so make sure you kill the goddamn bird. You move directly into a fight with a demon horse after this, and this is as far as I've got with the game so far. There are limited continues and a little bit of a learning curve, so it's quite a bit more challenging than Monster in My Pocket, but it does have a password system so you can cheat the limited continues aspect, and I will come back and try and finish this game one day. While not perfect, it's fun, and especially during the spooky season. So guys, those were 3 fun NES, Nintendo Entertainment System, games for Halloween. First question, did you guys figure out the theme? Well, we'll come back next week. No, I'm only kidding. The theme, of course, was every game had the word monster in the title. So you had Monster in My Pocket, Monster Party, and Frankenstein, The Monster Returns. So Monster was in every single title. Not necessarily the best games. Like I said, these aren't banner NES games. They're not going to really show up on anybody's top 10 NES list. But they're all pretty good, and they're all really fun. And most importantly, they perfectly fit the aesthetic for Halloween. Anyways, we'll see you guys again on Thursday, hopefully, for another Game Genie review. Happy Halloween Havoc, everybody! Yeah, you can really tell I just wet down my hair to do this video, eh? Hey there! Thank you for making it to the very end of the video. If you enjoyed the video, why don't you check out one of the other videos shown here? If you really enjoyed the video, you can even subscribe to my YouTube channel. And of course, if you really enjoyed the video, feel free to check out my Patreon. It would be appreciated.